Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast, everybody. Somehow we've convinced Andy Kerman to let us do not only a Pack a Day podcast audio episode this week, but to take over his YouTube channel for a day to talk none other than a hockey-themed Pack a Day podcast episode. You would expect nothing more from me and my co-host on the Pack a Day podcast, Janelle Mackey. Janelle, we just finished up watching the NHL Expansion Draft on ESPN. A little bit of a disappointment, so I think we want to give Packer fans a little bit something more that are hockey fans and go over our expansion draft list for the Green Bay Packers. We've done it a couple ways here, right? We're doing it the NHL way. What the NHL just did, we get to pick 11 players, protect whoever you want. But then we've also gone back to the 2002 expansion draft style, modified expansion draft style, and offered up our list of 5 players that we would be willing to give up. How much trouble did you have with this looking at it when you were looking at, because we're looking at it 2 different ways. Who would you want to protect and who would you want to just automatically give away? How much trouble did you have with this?
I feel like protecting was much easier than figuring out who I wanted to give away based on our 4-year minimum guideline. I realized how young our team is and how hard that was to kind of keep your star players while also finding guys who have that 4-year minimum. So that was pretty tricky, but I'm really excited about this. When you texted me Tuesday morning, about 12 hours after we had already recorded our Pack a Day episode, you're like, we dropped the ball. We had this opportunity to do something hockey related and we didn't. So yeah, like you said, convinced Andy to let us come on here for a few minutes and take over and talk hockey because we are the Packer hockey duo here.
We are the Pack a Day podcast hockey duo.
Yeah, and the Pack a Day.
Yeah, we really dropped the ball doing the audio version, especially when it was just you and me doing it. We didn't worry about bringing Eli in to the hockey folds here. So I think let's start with what you said is the easier one, and that's the NHL version. So in the NHL, there was teams got to protect 11 players. And there were certain restrictions on who they were allowed to protect. They could do a goalie, I think like 9 defense or 4 defensemen, 8 forwards, or switch it around however they wanted to. We're going much more cut and dry. 11 protected players, 5 have to be offense, 5 defense, and you can throw that other one, that 11th player on either side of the ball. These are the players in expansion draft you would be unwilling to lose at this point. So.
And we took all the money, contract stuff out of this. So it's very bare minimum. That would have been too complicated
Straight
for
emotion.
me.
Right, because I want to say this right off the bat. If we're doing this with contracts involved, there's a case to be made to put Aaron Rodgers on the unprotected list.
Yeah, or like Devontae Adams or Aaron Jones. Guys like that.
David Bakhtiari. Right, like they're and that's because that's what comes into play usually in an expansion draft and in the NFL. You kind of put up some of those bigger contract guys. Maybe you get those dumped off of your salary cap for free, without no muss, no fuss.
Or you can leave a guy out there and hope that their contract's too big to pick up and they stay with you because the other team's too afraid to have to pay them.
Exactly.
There's strategy in there that we didn't want to mess with.
Right. So yeah, we're going straight up and down with the protected list. Like you said, this was pretty straightforward. So let's start with the offense. I want to hear from you first. Did you put 6 on the offense or did you go 6 on the defense?
I went 5 and 5 and a special teamer.
Okay.
So I'm sure that kind of tells you.
I think we know where that's
who my
going.
11th guy is.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the offense. I want to hear your 5 offensive players. Who are you protecting on the Packers on the offense side of the ball?
All right. Well, I obviously want to protect Aaron Rodgers. I think that's pretty obvious. I don't care really what's going on here. This is our little fantasy world. Everything's okay. We're protecting Aaron Rodgers. I also protected Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. And then that's it for my playmakers, because then I also need to protect people. So I kept David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins.
All right. And I have to agree with you on almost all of those because I went pretty much the same. I did not put a special teamer on here.
Okay.
I went 6 offense and I went 5 defense. So on my protected list for the offense, I also have Aaron Rodgers, Elton Jenkins, Devontae Adams, and Aaron Jones. I'm also protecting Robert Tonyan and Alan Lazard.
Okay.
I'm really sorry about that.
Your dog didn't like that pick.
She did not like that I was protecting Alan Lazard. Actually, I think what she really didn't like was that I'm not protecting David Bakhtiari.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Did not put David Bakhtiari on the list for the reason, and this is for the hockey fans out there, I'm going the Carey Price rule.
Yep, I had a feeling you were going to say that.
The Carey Price rule. If he's healthy, there's not a chance in heck you don't protect him. But he's coming off of an injury. You don't know what you're going to get yet, and very expensive if we were, doing this with contracts and things like that. But I think if you wanted to go a different route with this, protect Al Lazard, who, if Devontae Adams has to leave at the end of this year, can step up and potentially be, a solid number, your Randall Cobb, for next year, that number 2 guy, if Amari Rodgers comes into his fold, into the number 1 role, Yeah. So I leave Bakhtiari unprotected because I'm not sure anyone would want to risk that.
Yeah, that's a really good strategy. I think if he would have shown signs of, maybe not coming back as soon as we thought he would, I also maybe would have put more thought into that. And if I didn't take a special teamer and I did 6 offense, I think I would have protected MVS. There's something I think that, I'm on the MVS redemption train. And I think, if you leave him unprotected, I think another team's going to scoop him up and they'll ball out for them. So I think that he's a guy who the ceiling hasn't been reached yet. And I wouldn't want another team to find that potential.
No, I totally agree with you. My thing is just if, between Alan Lazard and MVS, because that was the decision. There's really no one else on that offense that I'd be willing to throw a protection on. Yeah. If it's between those two, you've got an Alan Lazard, hopefully an Amari Rodgers. And so,
that's also true.
I like Alan Lazard. I love both these guys, but these are where the decisions come in,
Yeah.
You can't protect everybody.
Did you protect any rookies, or did we do the whole, rookies
I stayed
are
away
safe?
from rookies.
Okay, because, NHL rookies are safe. You can't take them in the expansion. I kind of just went with that rule. And
yeah.
It is interesting. I didn't even think about tight ends, though. Tight ends didn't even cross my mind.
That's, for me, and again, I just went with weapons.
Yeah.
You can not that offensive line isn't important, but the Packers have been able to find good offensive line talent everywhere. So I stuck with the weapons, and I think Robert Tonyan is a piece that I'd like to keep around, and I don't want to dangle that out there just yet for any expansion teams out here.
Right.
Before we get to the defense, I want to hear. Let's just get your special teamer out of the way. Is it last name Scott, first name JK?
No, I did keep Mason Crosby. I think he's up there in age, but I don't know who they'd bring in. Oh, and he coming off of a great year. I don't want to leave him out there. Somebody's going to take him, and it's going to be hard to replace him.
No, you're right. I had my processes reversed, so I thought you were giving up J.K. Scott. No, you're right. That's if you're going to go special teamer, if you're keeping any special teamer, it has to be Mason
I was going to
Crosby.
say, wait a minute, are you being serious?
No,
I don't want Todd to hurt me or anything.
Yeah, no, you're right. If you're keeping any special teamer, it's Mason Crosby. I'm surprised that I said in a piece I wrote for Game Ball Wisconsin earlier about what I would do during this offseason before the draft. I was in the camp of, if you found a replacement for Mason Crosby and money was tight, then it may be time to part ways with him. So you and I we're not exactly on the same track with Mason Crosby. But like I said, you're right. If you're going to protect any special teamer, it's the Silver Fox himself.
Absolutely.
So we both have 5 defensive players to protect on this list. Now, I'm going to go out of the limb here. I'm going to say we have the exact same 5 defensive players here. So let me. I'm going to run through mine, and you just tell me if you have them as well. Okay.
Okay.
obviously we've got Kenny Clark on the list.
Yep.
We've got the number one cornerback in the league, Jair Alexander.
Yep.
We've got Zadarius Smith.
Also, yes.
Yes. And then we've got two young guys, Rashawn Gary, or is that where do we differ? My fifth one is Darnell Savage. Do we have Savage?
Yes.
Okay, who are you protecting other than Rashawn Gary?
I kept Adrian Amos.
Okay.
Yep. I did look at Gary. Him and Savage were kind of my who's going to win the last spot, but I just really wanted to protect that backfield, and I felt like looking at where we are in the roster, I think we have enough young guys who could kind of step up, and you just kind of hope that Rashawn doesn't get taken. But I don't know. I just feel like that core defensive backfield is so solid. I didn't want to mess with anything.
Well, I mean, that's I guess not surprising. But both, you're going to keep both of that's the first, that's the only defensive position that we're doubling up on.
Yeah.
Is the safety group there with Amos as well.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess I don't really know what persuaded me to pick Savage over Gary. I think it was just, I feel like I've seen more out of them where Gary's kind of finally coming to his own.
Right.
Where these guys have kind of stepped into their role. And if I didn't take a special teamer, Gary would have been my sixth defense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Totally makes sense. So let's go to the other one that we have, the NFL style.
Mm-hmm.
If we're doing it pretty much like the 2002 expansion draft for the Houston Texans, where every team puts up 5 players that the Texans can select from, and it's different than the NHL one, because in the NHL, the Kraken picked a player from every single team, one player from every single team. For the expansion draft in the NFL, they can pick up to 3 players from any team that they want. So the Packers didn't even lose a player in the last expansion draft in 2002. This one here, we're using a modified version of what happened in 2002. A lot less rules. The only rule we gave each other was that any of the players we unprotected had to be on the Packers for at least 4 years. We stayed away.
It a little tricky.
It did make it a little bit tricky. So we're not worrying about contracts, or if they're going to be a free agent, or if they're coming off injury or whatever. The only rule, the player has to have played for the Packers for at least 4 years. I want to know right off the bat, how many defense, how many offense did you go in your split? Because we didn't put any restrictions. It could be all 5 on one or the other. So how did you end up splitting it?
Looking at my list here, I went 2-2-1.
Did you go another special team?
Yeah.
Oh my
God. I didn't even realize that I even split on everything, but I did throw in a special teamer who has hit that 4-year minimum.
Mm-hmm. I jumped the gun a little bit. I think we know who that is.
Yeah.
So.
My first one I'm sending to wherever our fake expansion is taking place is J.K. Scott.
Well, see, here's the thing. Not necessarily sending him, because whatever this expansion team is can look and be like, no, thank you. We're good.
And I, not to put my age out there or anything, but I don't remember the NFL expansion draft. I was only maybe 6. I don't know how old you were, but so I didn't really know any of the rules coming into it. So this was really interesting to kind of just hear how they did it and what they based it on. So yeah, J.K. Scott, he's available, I should say.
Yeah, in the 2002 draft, no special teamers allowed to be placed on there, but we didn't make any. We were using a very liberal definition here. So J.K. Scott, your first one off of the list. I'll go with mine. I gave up 3 defensive players and 2 offensive players off of this list.
I think I went 1-3-1. My bad. I don't know who I thought was on offense. I only got rid of one offense.
Well, let's hear yours. Let me hear your other 4. We can see how that split goes.
So my one offensive player that I am leaving available is EQ.
I have him as well.
He finally hit that 4-year mark. A lot of these guys are younger, but I had to go with guys who, one, had that 4-year, and have also been with the Packers for 4 years. So they happen to be a handful of younger guys. And then I went over to the defense, and Dean Lowry was one of them.
Same. We might have the same 5 except for Jake Scott.
We might. So Dean Lowry is available. Kevin King.
I did not put Kevin King.
Didn't put Kevin King.
No.
And then Josh Jackson.
I did have Josh Jackson.
He was my last one. I was like, this one was obvious. I don't know why I didn't.
Just sitting there, right there for you.
Almost too obvious where I almost missed it.
Right. So we agreed on Josh Jackson, EQ, and Dean Lowry.
Yep.
Right. So my other 2, I have a defensive and offensive player. I have Shannon Sullivan on this list as well.
Okay.
And maybe a little bit controversial or whatever, Lucas Patrick.
Okay.
Also on the list. I don't want to lose him, but I think that he's sort of that borderline player where I don't know if Lucas Patrick goes somewhere and makes a roster somewhere else necessarily.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let me take that back. Not that he doesn't make a roster, but that he wouldn't be in the same kind of position that he's in with the Packers. You know? And so I just wonder if you're a team that you're an expansion team that has all these other picks available, there's probably a couple guards that are going to be available that are above Lucas Patrick. And so I think you're pretty safe to keep Lucas Patrick on there. And then also I think that there's plenty of talent behind Lucas Patrick, that there's a chance Lucas Patrick loses his starting job this year or sees less playing time this year. So
he kind of bumps down the list a little bit.
Right. Okay.
And then Shannon Sullivan was your last
Shannon Sullivan.
I looked at him too. Yep. I don't know.
Yeah. Like I said, when you kind of put these restrictions on it, that's when it becomes, a little bit trickier. So
you realize how young our team is. And how drop off from Aaron Rodgers to what we could use is pretty small.
Right. And like you said, not even just young, but just how many players have not spent a total of 4 years? Because Zadarius, Preston Smith, Amos, they don't make this list because they haven't been here for 4 years.
Yeah, Preston Smith crossed my mind, and then you said 4 years with the Packers, and I was like, that changes everything. I was just going off experience, then you're like 4 years with the Packers minimum, and that made it a fun challenge.
It did. So we want to hear what people have to think. There's plenty of other options out here. Let us know what you think. Our socials are right here below us at DK all the way for myself, at Big Mac _4 for Janelle. Thank you to Andy Herman for letting us take over your video stream for at least one day to break in with some pseudo hockey talk. We really appreciate it. We hope you guys subscribe to us on the podcast and here on YouTube. Subscribe right now to get all of these videos from Andy. He'll be back again tomorrow with his normal stuff. And as always, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.